I'm a whistleblower for Area 51. The truth about us is far more terrifying than anything you can imagine. I started working there shortly after the storming incident of 2019, but not in the way you might expect. I wasn't hired because of my scientific prowess or anything like that. I wasn't even given an interview. No, I got to be part of this think tank solely based on the fact that I managed to break in and get farther than anyone ever had. At the time, I wasn't even considered a scientist, and maybe I'm not one now. My field of studies was much more pedestrian. I was a professional security software developer, which means that companies like ADT would hire me to come in and make sure their systems actually worked right. Basically, a career criminal. I thought Area 51 would be no different than a large house to break into, and for the most part, I was right. I just didn't realize the trap was going to be inside the facility, and the bait had been laid out for people exactly like me, people with nothing left to lose. Let me take my time and rewind to the beginning of this story, because I know some who hear this will be skeptical. I was the same way. I didn't believe in aliens. I always assumed places like Area 51 were a smokescreen. I wish I had a bigger imagination so I could have guessed what the real nightmare was. I can still remember how the air smelled that day. It was dark and dry. There were hardly any clouds that night. I was expecting a larger crowd, to be honest, but from where I kept hidden, I had a pretty good view of a guardhouse. There were 10 people standing nearby, shouting for the armed soldiers to let them in. The soldiers didn't even move. I mean, what would you expect to happen? I didn't really think I was going to even make a move because I knew that the government had warned they would shoot any trespassers, and I liked having a functional body. But then, one of the other stormer idiots near the gate actually solved the problem for me. During the online rallying, a few of the more irrational people said they were going to bring weapons, and not just the conventional ones, like a knife or a gun. One of these rednecks brought what looked like a bomb. As soon as the soldiers saw it, they rushed toward the man. They were telling him to get on the ground, shouting that he needed to not resist. A few of the other protesters went mad, starting to climb the fence, distracting the other guards, and I saw my window of opportunity. While they were distracted, I slipped toward the back of the guardhouse. I kept my body to the ground, using the camouflage hoodie I chose to wear to blend in with my surroundings. I still remember how fast my heart was beating as I crawled toward the fence. The soldiers were shouting louder and louder. The supposed bomb fell to the ground, and one of their teammates tackled it, trying to shield everyone from the perceived attack. Nothing happened, just as I assumed it wouldn't. It wasn't a real bomb, but the distraction had given me the chance to slip into the guardhouse and wait for the soldiers to return. The next part of my plan was to be able to grab a uniform and get into the premises with one of their credentials. I knew the bomb would have them rattled, but they still had guns. So instead, I kept quiet and slipped into the closet, listening as their radios went off and alerted them to a few other intruders trying to climb into the compound. It felt as though I was holding my breath for the longest time as the guards finished their duties. It was almost 3 hours later they left, giving me a chance to move again. The entire time, I felt certain at some point my location would be compromised. Maybe it was good luck. Maybe it was destiny. But somehow, I managed to remain out of sight. Nearby monitors allowed me to study the terrain on this side of the compound and figure out what the patterns of the guards were. At first, it felt like I was staring at a giant maze, but then slowly, all of the pieces seemed to fall in place. I found the closest dormitory to my guardhouse and started that way. I don't have to tell you, after seeing the barrel of the soldiers' guns pressed up against people's skull, I was being extremely cautious. But I also wasn't thinking straight. I wasn't sure what I was trying to accomplish or what I was searching for. Everyone knew Area 51 housed secrets, but now that I was here, it almost seemed ordinary, enough to make me doubt my next move as I got inside the dorm and found a set of clothes that actually fit me. It felt easy that I had gotten this far. I knew I had taken risks, but to manage to avoid any kind of confrontation was making me more paranoid. Were they just going to make an example of me when I got caught? Publicly execute me in front of the other protesters? As I finished putting on the uniform, I tried my best to relax. I look like one of them now, but I knew it was too soon to celebrate. No matter what, going forward from this point on was going to mean I couldn't simply escape if I wanted. I was stepping into the mouth of a lion's den, and if I got caught, it would be a fight to the death, probably my own. Whatever I find, I thought, better be worth it. My instinct told me to head towards the largest building and see what they were hiding in there. I know this wasn't much of a plan. All I had to record was a flimsy iPhone that had half the screen cracked. But it was this determination that led me to actually being the spotlight for the top researchers here at Area 51. The entire time, the only thing that was really overwhelming me was my own mind. The whole facility was far too quiet, almost like a graveyard. I wasn't sure if I was being watched or simply being allowed to wander. It was a honeypot, and I was the clueless fly lured in. I eventually found an elevator that went into the sublevels and noticed that some of them were locked under clearance codes that I would have to hack. Pulling the panel out, I began to hotwire the circuits and focused on figuring out the right combination. Nothing was working. Then I felt a gun to my own head, and I froze in place, finally having been caught. "On the ground. Keep your hands where we can see them," the military officer ordered. I did as I was told as they spoke into their radio. I fully expected they could kill me right there and dispose of my body if I even dared to sneeze. Instead, a bag was placed over my head, and I was told to march. About 10 minutes later, down a very dank corridor, I was placed in a holding room with the bag still over my head. "I need to piss," I told the soldier as they tied my hands and pushed me to the wall. "Soil yourself, idiot. I don't have time to play your babysitter. The commander will be handling you personally." They snapped back as they hit me in the gut with the butt of their rifle, causing me to hunch over in pain. That was only the beginning of my suffering. They placed me in a solitary cell and stripped me of my clothes. Then they doused me with chemicals and started to bleach my fingertips and eventually scraped them off. "What the hell are you doing?" I shouted, but none of them ever gave me a response. I just prayed it would end soon and they would just knock me unconscious. About a few hours later, I was taken within one of the highest security level rooms down that same elevator I had tried to hack, supposedly to interrogate another person that attempted to storm the place. When I got to the room, I saw how that went. Their corpse was on the floor with a bullet in their skull, and one of the top dogs told me to sit and then lock the door behind them. I got the distinct impression we were alone and that no one outside was even monitoring our conversation. That either meant I was about to die or find out what the hell they wanted from me. I prayed it was the latter option because, as badly as they had treated me, I still had the will to live. "Mighty brave to risk your software company for a silly prank," the commander sneered. At first, after having been able to sneak around the facility for most of the night without being caught, I thought they were bluffing. But to prove their point, the man passed me photocopies of my driver's license and even a still image of my house. "It was also extremely brave of you to come this far when you have people you care about," the general told me. I wanted to say that I didn't care about the people in the picture, but I knew that would sound selfish. Everything so far about my behavior had been brazen, and I didn't want to test my limits. I bit my lip, studying his demeanor. He wasn't here to punish me, but to assess if I was valuable to him. I still had a few cards up my sleeve to prove that, and decided to call him out. "What do you want from someone like me?" I asked them evenly. "You catch on quick. Consider your success to getting within this facility as an interview. You are the only one to have made it this far," they told me. "An interview? What does that mean?" "We have hundreds of researchers and scientists working here daily to make our country a safer place, but no one like you, someone that can think outside the box. In short, you're a grifter, and you know how to get to things that no one else can," the general responded. I suppose I should be flattered, but somehow I feel threatened and scolded. Not to mention I was battered and assaulted already. I was doing my best to match his tone, but the honest truth was I didn't know for sure if he would decide to end my days right there and then. "You came to find answers to the universe, to understand what it is about Area 51 that makes it so special. I'll make you a deal. Come work for us and find out, and you get to walk away from this trespassing with your life. Are you saying I can't leave unless I agree to join you? I'm saying you won't be leaving either way. You'll be in a body bag or stay in that uniform. Your choice. The tension I felt in the air was so palpable. I was trying my best to not look nervous. It's a bluff. You would have already shot me dead if you thought I was of no use to you, I argued. I think you might fail to understand that you have no power here. Let me make things clearer for you. The general gestured for 2 soldiers to bring in another man with a bag over their head. He was in a similar uniform to mine, clearly not an actual soldier though, because he was shaking like a twig. When they pulled the bag off their face, I found myself staring at an exact doppelganger of myself. I did my best to not be freaked out. How was that even possible? I told myself this had to be a trick of some kind to frighten me. Whatever you do, don't listen to them, the man said. His eyes frantically looked into my own. He sounded like me too. Consider this as a preview of what will happen should you decide to not cooperate, the general told me. He gave the order, and the soldiers shot the other me straight in the face. I won't forget the desperation in his eyes, because I recognized it as my own. You may not understand what you just saw, but trust and believe it can happen to you as well. So what will it be? Interested to find out more about us? The older gentleman asked. I wanted to scream. What I saw defied explanation and shook me to my core. It changed everything I thought I understood. I kept my mouth shut and agreed to their demands, letting them give me quarters and warm food. My mind was reeling as they walked me down the corridor, guns on both sides of me. All of this felt as though it had been a huge setup. How could that other guy have my face? What was going on here? Was the entire storm raid meant to find someone like me? But for what purpose? They told me they wanted me to steal something. I couldn't imagine what that might be. For the next few weeks, they told me nothing, but constantly placed me in training modules that tested my physical abilities to the max. Running the gauntlets over and over again almost made me lose my spirit. Honestly, I wish I could say it was my strength that kept me going, but I'm sure it actually was my stubbornness. I kept going because despite the precarious situation I was in, my curiosity to understand what they had unlocked was even greater. I had gotten a sneak peek of it when I saw the doppelganger, but my mind couldn't fathom what it meant, how far down the rabbit hole I was about to go. 3 weeks after my arrival, I was called to one of the lower levels of the facility near the central office. It was time, the commander said, to see if I was still useful to them. He placed a small device in front of me, which looked like a pocket watch, except that it didn't have the typical instruments you might find within. He told me to put it on my belt and began to explain how it worked. I know you have questions. You've seen things no one else has been allowed to see. But be warned, your eyes are about to be opened in ways that you've never thought possible. Just as I prepared to open my mouth and ask a question, I felt the device begin to vibrate, and then my entire body began to shake with pain. Grabbing hold of my wrist, I tried to take the device off, but suddenly found that it was infused with my skin, pressing hard against my navel and digging into my flesh the way a tick would. In front of me, the man began to glow almost like a crystal, and my vision became blurry until, at last, I couldn't see anything except for a blinding white light all around me. The pain reached a crescendo as I fell to the floor screaming and writhing and shaking and vomiting, begging for it to stop. Then, the white light began to spin and fall at the same time, until at last, all I heard was a deafening whistle in my ear. I don't really know how long I lay there. It felt like my body was going to explode at any moment. But when I opened my eyes, I found that the general was gone, and the room was seemingly abandoned. It looked bleaker than before, drab and colorless. The chair he'd been sitting in was now covered in cobweb and black mold, and the desk looked like it would fall apart just from the simplest push. I stood up, trying to get my bearings and shouting all kinds of crude things to whoever was listening. But all I heard was the sound of my own voice. Moving towards the door, I got a better look at my surroundings, realizing that the rest of the facility also looked just as abandoned as this room. My footprints made impressions in the dust as I walked out, trying to understand exactly what they had just done to me. In the next room, I found dilapidated equipment, computers that looked like they hadn't been turned on in centuries, along with more cobwebs, dust, decay everywhere I looked, overgrowth and foliage, the room squeezing out every last bit of life that might have existed there. If I didn't know any better, I would have thought that the room was exactly as where I've been standing only moments earlier. But something was different besides the decay. I felt an eerie, uneasy feeling creep into my body. As I pushed the old equipment aside and moved on to the next room, everything was familiar, and yet at the same time, it was different. Darker, covered in scars and sores. The facility hadn't been used in years, and yet I was certain that no time had passed. Finally, I found an exit that would allow me to go outside and see what it became of the world around me. Although I had already expected to see more destruction and chaos, I found an explanation. The sky was a crimson red with swirling clouds that looked like they were made of dragons and snakes, each one battling each other as endless lightning cascaded back and forth. The ground was cracked, covered with carcasses almost everywhere I could see, and insects crawled in and out of holes and orifices that resembled the back of a toad. I knew this was supposed to be the ground I was walking upon. This was the earth. And yet, not the one I was familiar with. It was a hellscape world overrun with nightmares everywhere I looked. All I saw was death and decay. And on the horizon, a strange wave of flames shimmering towards the facility. It wasn't a mirage, nor was it a natural phenomenon. It was almost studying me, aware of my presence, and ready to swallow me up as I stepped forward towards the rocky soil and try to figure out what this place was. I saw hints of the world I was familiar with, except with slight variations. This was how you might look at a mirror that had cracks all throughout it, little splinters that changed everything. This was our world. Except, it wasn't. It was a different version of it. Suddenly, the device that had pushed its way into my body began to shake again, rattling my insides like toys, and I fell to the ground, trying my best to avoid being covered by the insects that scrambled to feast on my flesh like I was a fresh meal. Just as they began to bite and rip apart at my clothes, the strange world that I had been dropped into faded away, and I found myself again in solitary confinement, being observed by 2 scientists along with the general, who only smiled. Do you understand yet what it is you're seeing? The world you know around us is not the only one there. Others only a few clips away. A multiverse that we can travel to in the blink of an eye. The capsule that I injected you with will help you to travel back and forth between our world and another world. Think of it as your ticket home, and treat it as the only thing that will keep you alive. You still haven't told me what it is that I'm supposed to be doing, I argued. At first, when we discovered this alternate dimension, we simply wanted to study it, but now we wish to harness the power that is inside. You see, humankind has had to evolve in a different way over there. The weapons are far more potent, the technology far more deadly. Survival has been a necessity, a luxury for the few that are still alive. You're telling me there are people that live in that hell? I asked in shock. Over the years, we've managed to run into a few, often with bad results for those that we sent across. That's why your skills come in handy so much. You managed to break into here without even tipping off a single camera. I don't care how you did it. The simple fact is, I want you to do it again. Except this time, you're going to be breaking into their facility, find what they're working on, and bring it back to us. How am I supposed to know exactly what I'm looking for? It could be anything. He passed a series of photos towards me, which looked like they had been taken from a body cam. Most of them revealed a strange device that resembled a bomb, but also looked like it could move about like a giant metallic spider. Like I said, you're not the first one that's been crossed over. and you probably won't be the last if you can further our development of this weapon to help us to prepare for the war to come. Then those that you care about will be suitably compensated should you not make it out alive. I don't have any reassurance that you'll do anything you say. You've already proven to me that you'll kill me if I disagree. How can I be sure you're really going to take care of my family? I asked evenly. We could simply shoot and kill you if you would prefer, the general asked angrily. I want full access to your files, with the ability to send them off-site in the event of my death. That way I know that even if something happens to me, at least the truth will get out. Done, and we'll even sign a blank check for your family. I was shocked to hear that he was so eager to agree with my demands, and I wondered why this technology was so valuable to them. What was it that I was about to unleash on our world, and would bringing it here change the course of our history to become more like that nightmarish place I had escaped from? One more thing, in the event that I wouldn't be able to bring it back on my own, do you have any contacts in the other world that you can trust that can help us? Our last set of operatives that managed to find an enclave where they settled in and waged an ongoing cold war with the humans there, or mutants as we call them. We have an estimated 6 on the ground, so you get to be lucky number 7. Now get some rest, eat, shower. This will be your last night on a peaceful planet Earth for quite some time. Sleep was actually the last thing on my mind as I laid down in my cot. Every time I closed my eyes, I either saw that blood-red sky or felt the millions of insects crawling over me, swarming inside my body. It amazed me to think that anyone could survive in a place like that. But I promised myself that I would find a way out of this mess, just like I always did. The key was to play along and live long enough to figure out what this parallel heist was truly all about. In the morning, they informed me that I would be given coordinates closer to the enclave. Now that my body had traveled through the dimension one time, it would be easier to pinpoint where I would land. The test we were performing yesterday was to make certain that your molecular structure could handle the crossover. Now that we see your body has not split apart or combusted, you should be able to travel freely. However, if you experience any strange symptoms or feel your skin begin to burn or shake uncontrollably, you should attempt to return to the portal as quickly as possible, because it might be that the particles within the other world are breaking down your cellular structure, and it could cause a dimensional explosion. It's only happened once before, and it was not a pretty sight. Isn't there something I can take to make sure that doesn't happen? I mean, you have an entire battalion of soldiers over there. How are they surviving? Rest assured, we will do everything possible to make sure that your body stays in one piece, monitoring you from here. But you do need to worry about them. They have adapted in ways that you probably couldn't, to put it mildly. Now, do you have everything good to go? The scientist asked. I told them I did, and I was led into the next room, where once again, all of my senses were shut off, starting with my sight. The darkness covered me like a shroud, seeping into my veins as the device activated, and I felt myself move across dimensions once again. Surprisingly, it was less painful than last time, and I wondered if their methods were truly working, because the location I landed in was completely different than before. It was a city where it was raining, and I felt completely lost. "You're the newbie?" A voice said from somewhere in front of me. I was sure no one had been there before. Yet now, I saw a bearded man standing in a black jumpsuit and pointing a rifle at me. He asked to show the device that was embedded in my body, and I quickly pulled my shirt up. "You don't look like a jewel thief." A second sniper laughed as I was pulled inside. I wasn't exactly told what it would be. To be fair, I wasn't given a choice either. I quipped back. There were only 4 of them altogether, not the 6 I had been told about, and most of them looked rough around the edges, like they had been in this hell longer than necessary. Then again, from what I could tell so far, I didn't like being here either. There were clear signs of what this place was. Another reality, another dimension. But I held back my opinions until I learned more as they led me to the campfire. We keep this burning to keep the griefs away. Ever play Minecraft? Well, night here is just as deadly, and it's always night. A girl about my age commented. She was missing an eye. I chose to not ask how that happened. "How long have you been here?" I decided to ask instead, causing one of the men to snicker and remark, "Long enough, rookie. It only takes a few seconds for this place to eat you up and spit you out." I knew given their injuries and what little I had seen of this place, he wasn't joking. Whatever we were doing, we needed to do it fast. The object we are trying to get close to is out here in the wastes. We call it a spider because it looks like a giant fucking bronze arachnid. The one with the sniper on my head said. I asked them to put the weapon down before the discussion continued, and they seemed reluctant to do so. Hard to trust anyone out here. He apologized and introduced himself as Fisher. The others were Olivia, Lucas, and Trish, and it was clear I wouldn't know much else about them during my time here except their names. The wastes were exactly as I expected them to be. An arid desert filled with lifeless sands and predators that moved across them like whispering shadows. These weren't the typical Arizona deserts like we have on our Earth though, because as they showed me security footage of the area around the city, I realized it was filled with inhuman monsters. Some of them, Trish said, had once been human. Something in the air or perhaps the time in this place had changed their bodies, and their minds soon followed. I think of them as like the undead. They are only bent on killing, and they follow the machine everywhere it goes. So if we want to get close enough to actually get inside, we have to figure out a way around them, Lucas explained. The machine was bigger than I thought it would be, and I realized that his description about it resembling an 8-legged arachnid was actually pretty accurate. Long thin legs moved with methodical grace across the desert as it smashed and destroyed everything in its path and made a weird whirring sound that caused my ears to hurt even from the audio they had recorded. I wondered how much worse it would be when I saw the thing for real. So far, the only entry point we have found for the spider is up top. About a week ago, we attempted to launch an aerial assault and get into the thing. We were mostly successful, except the part where our operative didn't come back once he went inside. I felt my body shiver. That explains why they were down one member. You can't communicate very good with Earth, can you? I gasped. Olivia shook her head and explained that the messages often experienced a temporal delay of sort. We could all be dead for about 2 weeks and they'd be none the wiser, she told us. Another terrifying thought I realized as I studied the map. So the spider moves in a pattern then and stays in this territory? I gasped. Yes, from what we can tell, it's never broken that trend, Lucas told me as he passed me some gear and some food. We are guessing there might be a broadcasting tower somewhere nearby that is giving it signals, but once again, we haven't been able to track it. They aren't using any type of frequency that we are familiar with. I thought about what the commander had told me and asked if the equipment for the silent radio transmissions were what we had been told to steal. All of them shared an uneasy look at each other as though this was not what they were allowed to disclose to many. And Trish said plainly, all we know for sure is that it's inside the core of the spider and it's vital for the future of our planet. I found it strange that the group didn't know more about the object we were stealing, but I decided not to say anything given the circumstances that brought me here. Chances were all of us were brought here against our will. I looked at the map of the wasteland and studied the spider's track, trying to see if there was a reason it went in a particular direction. Maybe there's something underground, I suggested. Olivia looked at the map and admitted that she had never considered that possibility. How exactly would we be able to determine that? Lucas asked. The footprints. If there is some kind of electrical charge or something, we can pick it up using our equipment like a frequency. That would be a good place to start, I said. It was agreed we would roll out in an hour. They had an old army jeep that looked like it could fall apart from a gust of wind, and everyone checked to make sure that their weapons were fully loaded before Trish opened the garage door. For the next 20 minutes, we drove out of the desolate city. I was told to keep my weapon ready and keep an eye out on the road behind me, although no one ever said why. When we first got here, this place had life to it, but the viruses and the toxic rain killed most of it. As we kept moving, I saw shadows that danced across the buildings. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. Then I realized it was swarms of people, clinging to each other like vines and moving together the way a hive of bees might. They didn't resemble the typical zombie horde you might see in a movie though, and perhaps that is what unsettled me the most. They looked like normal people, except their eyes were ripped out. Perhaps they had torn the pupils from their skulls? I wasn't sure. As we drove past, Trish kept her weapon steady should any of them attack, and I wondered if one of these strange things had managed to grab her before and attempted to make her like them. It wasn't a story I imagined she wanted to share. "Speed up, damn it," Lucas ordered, but Fisher insisted that we needed to keep things steady. "Don't forget, sudden movement attracts attention," he said. Just as he finished admonishing us, the ground began to shake, and he said a few curses, shifting gears. We had no choice but to pick up speed as gigantic potholes opened in the road, attempting to swallow us up. "What are those?" I asked as I heard the shrieks from below the ground. "Do you want to find out?" Lucas asked as he fired at something that tried to slither out of a hole. The rain started to pelt our vehicle, burning the metal as we drove faster out of the city. Despite the fact that it was a clear day, it felt like disaster could easily still strike us, even as the rumbling died down. The quiet here was deadly, I thought to myself as I focused on the road ahead. I could make out the silhouette of the metallic spider on the horizon. It lurched and moved and rumbled like a leviathan would, and we slowed down next to an overlook to find a tunnel somewhere to begin the search for the transceiver. "Are you picking up anything?" Olivia asked our driver as we used the radio to adjust the frequencies. At first, I was worried about whether or not my theory was wrong. I was trying my best to prove I was valuable to the team. The commander made it abundantly clear my existence would be useless if I didn't. And then at last, a signal came through, north about 2 miles. It was faint, but Fisher was certain it was the right way to go. "This might be your shining moment, rookie," he shouted as he kicked the army jeep back into gear and drove toward the source. The humans that were following us also started to chase us more radically, as they did not stop until they were right on top of us. Trish aimed her weapon and fired at each one that got within an arm's length distance, and I did the same until at last a tunnel overshadowed us, and it was impossible to see where they were coming from. We drove in silence except for the sound of the engine itself as the signal grew stronger. Until at last, Lucas stopped the jeep, and we got out. "Spread out, but don't go too far. You never know what might be crawling around here," Olivia ordered. The light on our guns was the only thing illuminating the dark cave, and I heard the faint sound of skittering insects upon the walls. A few moments later though, I discovered they were not insects at all, but rather half-skinned humans that were devouring each other in the darkness, and the moment they saw our light, they began to swarm towards us. We all shot them one by one as we ran towards the signal strength and an open pit right in the middle of the road. Trish almost fell in. "I can see something. It looks like a radio transmitter," she shouted excitedly. "Hurry up and shut it down before they drag us under the dirt," Lucas replied as one of the humans bit his arm. I fired down into the pit where the signal was coming from, sparks of electricity shooting off at every direction and thankfully scaring away the crazed residents of the tunnel. At last, Olivia announced that the signal had died out, and we hurried back to the jeep. Fisher bandaged up Lucas as we drove out towards the wasteland, where we saw that the spider had already stopped moving. "Looks like it worked," Lucas commented as he reloaded his rifle. "Getting inside should be the easy part. We need an escape plan though. I don't think that signal jam will last forever," Trish commented. The air in the desert was so silent that it gave me an uneasy feeling, like the entire planet was waiting for us to make our move. "So I just need to climb into the core and extract it, right? How will I know what I'm looking for?" I asked as we got right under the spider. The thing had to be nearly 20 stories tall, and I wondered, since it had frozen in place, what was keeping it from toppling over. Fish gathered the supplies and we started the climb, the slick metallic legs of the spider proving difficult to go up, but the spikes on our boots kept a good grip. Olivia and Lucas kept an eye on the horizon, and Trish kept the engine running. I heard the crackle of lightning across the sky as we reached the top of the metallic beast, and I looked out toward the city. It occurred to me that we were likely near this dimension's version of Las Vegas, and the city skyline confirmed it, meaning this desert was likely where Area 51 should have been. Had those tunnels been the same one that I was led through by the commander back on our Earth? Was there a connection? I had no time for any of those questions, because Fisher insisted we needed to climb into the open chasm at the top of the spider. All I saw was darkness, but I could hear the faint sound of breathing. It had never occurred to me that this strange metallic creature might be somehow alive. We dropped down into the belly of the beast, and Fisher tapped his headlamp, showing all around us a strange mixture of circuitry and flesh. "What is all this?" I asked. From what little we were able to extract via data ports, there was some point in this world's history where artificial intelligence and fleshy biological life mixed together. It seems likely that the humans who were alive at the time thought it was the only way to survive the apocalypse, Fisher said as we pushed through the wet mesh. Their cure became a plague and ultimately destroyed all life here, I gasped, recalling what we had seen in the city. Ever since then, the army had us extracting tech they feel is valuable. This is just another item in a long list that keeps us from being forgotten about. Or eliminated, he said bitterly. We reached the core a few moments later, and I held back a gasp. There amid the darkness and the entanglement of cords and throbbing flesh, I saw what was once a human body. Fisher made the sign of the cross and said this was their other team member. Seems exposure to the spider can do some nasty things. Let's make sure that doesn't happen to us, he said as we searched for the correct processor to extract. Everything looks the same. I stopped when my headlamp caught the edge of a small black box, the kind you might find within an airplane, and read what was on the side of it. Property of the US Army. Fisher, I think this is it, I said as he got the tools ready. We heard the spider make a groan, and we knew it would be on the move soon. Looks like it. That's weird though. It's like this black box is from our Earth. How did it get here? Why do they want it back? We can find out when we get out of here, I said as we cut away at the flesh and heard the spider groan and shake. Then, the intestinal chambers nearby opened and shrieked, and Fisher found himself caught in one. Shit, don't move, I can get you out, I said as it started to pull him in. Get the thing out of here, don't worry about me, he growled, pushing me away. Are you insane? If I leave you here, you'll die, I snapped back. Rookie, I was dead a long time before I ever set foot in this hell. Go now. The others depend on that thing. I hesitated as the spider made more noise, and I saw the undulating flesh begin to close in on me. I apologized to him one final time as I hurried up the side of the makeshift wall, listening to him scream as the spider began to digest him. I stood there on the edge of its head as the giant metallic beast moved again. I saw Trish driving alongside it, and Lucas was firing at humans that were attempting to climb up its side. I would have to jump to make it off alive. The wind rustled through my hair, and I said a prayer as I clutched the black box and slid down the closest leg. I heard the others shout my name, and I was sure I would probably break something. Maybe I have extremely good luck, but somehow I was in the jeep with barely a scratch on me. Lucas looked at the black box as we drove away, and he seemed equally confused by the price. Whoa, hold on. Why are we stealing something that belongs to the government we work for? I looked back at the spider, a few final pieces clicking into place in my mind as we hurried toward the city. I think Area 51 built that spider and sent it here to destroy this world. That makes no sense. Why would they kill another Earth? Olivia asked. We said nothing as we drove back to the base, but the more I thought about it, the more uncomfortable I became with returning the black box. What if we just destroy it? I asked. Then the goons at Area 51 will kill all of us, Trish pointed out as she aimed her rifle at me and added, We've worked too hard for months just for you to come and play the self-righteous hero. I reluctantly passed it to them as Lucas made contact, and she added that the people who died trying to get this would want them to finish the job. Maybe he's right. Maybe there is something more to this that we don't understand. We've been told that this is vital to the future of our world, but why is it that this device destroyed this world? What are they not telling us? Lucas asked. Trish scoffed as she finished inputting the coordinates for home. I think we all know what happens if we become insubordinate. All of us are disposable. And whatever this is, if we don't return it, they'll just hire another crew who will. We could run. This device opens portals to other dimensions, right? Who's to say we have to use it to go home? I asked and looked to the others to see if maybe they would join my side. Everything in my body told me that something was wrong. Before anyone could make up their mind, The portal back to our world opened, and gunfire erupted into the base. The people I had barely spent time with were dead on the floor, and I was about to be next as the commander entered, when I grabbed the black box and fumbled an excuse to keep my head on my shoulders. "I can work for you and keep doing this," I shouted as a soldier pushed me to my knees. I was sure I would die in that moment. Maybe I should have died. The commander told him to wait and looked at me callously. "And what is it that you think we do? You're sending teams to other dimensions and lying to them to get data back on weapons that you send out to kill other dimensions. But you'll need someone as an insider to make sure the mission goes your way," I said, waiting to see if he valued keeping me alive for another moment or not. "You want to live simply to watch as we destroy all other universes?" the commander asked. "If it means we survive, that's all that matters," I lied. And that's how I became an operative for this shit show, and how I've learned what Area 51 really is. I've crossed many dimensions since then, sometimes even to ones that are more like home than I care to admit. Our government is slowly poisoning and killing them all, one by one, and I meet new people, and some of them become my friends. I watch as most of them die. The ones that don't are like me, spies that make sure our operation goes as planned. I tell myself this is to keep our dimension safe, but I have no idea. I will gather all the information I can until I know the answers, I tell myself. That was years ago, and since then, I have seen things that should have driven me insane. Perhaps I am. After all, the people I have killed and the universes I've seen die, I think any rational thought is long gone. The worlds I've been to all bear scars from what we've done to them, and I know I bear some responsibility. I wonder if I gave it enough time, eventually my feelings would go numb, and it wouldn't bother me anymore to see the pile of dead bodies that I trampled over just to appease my masters. But that isn't true. Every face of every person that has gone through to the other side had seen what has happened to the worlds that are just like ours is burned in my memory, especially the ones I had to kill. I think what bothers me the most is the fact that we are the one destroying these Earths, tearing them apart limb by limb, and turning them into dark hollow shells of what was once a vibrant, beautiful dimension. The commander claimed the only way for our world to stay alive is by defeating the other ones we're at war with, and we will always be at war, and the only thing that matters is if we win. In the meantime, I'm sending this transmission out to anyone who was like me, bold and ambitious, and wanted to learn the secrets of Area 51. I'm telling you to please stay away. It's not worth it. The things I have seen, the things I've done. Fisher was right. I died a long time ago. Now I just watch as one by one, more worlds do the same. And I imagine somewhere out there are infinite versions of myself choking for air, losing their sanity, and slowly dying. One day, it will be my turn to do the same. And until then, I keep running.